Hey everybody, Tony Carroll here with Mayday Monday. This month is Heart Health Month, and we were going to focus on some of the issues related to heart health. Just a review of last month, if you were here with us in January, or if you weren't, January focused on Trevor Brown. It was another edition where we talked about Trevor Brown and the incident he was involved in. Loudoun County had the Mayday with the house explosion, a gas explosion last month. We talked to the battalion chief involved in the rescue. Hopefully, you had a chance to look at that and learn from that. Last month's skill drill was the calling the Mayday skill drill, which you can still, it's always apt. It's always a great drill to do all the time. So get out and do that. But that was our Mayday Monday, and this month again is a Heart Health Month Mayday. With that, I have a friend of mine, and unfortunately, we weren't able to come up with a date to have a live talking session with him. So he recorded a session for us. Todd Leduc, you guys have seen him before on Mayday Monday. We talked to him back in February. I think it was maybe 2022 where we talked about heart health with him then. So a great resource for us. He'll talk a little bit about what he is doing and where he's working, and the stuff that he's doing for the fire service. So please check that out. Again, now we're going to play that session, and this is about 30 minutes of Todd giving us some suggestions on surviving the fire ground with a emphasis on health, on heart health.
Well, listen, I'm honored and thrilled to be joining you for Mayday Monday. This February, of course, is American Heart's uh, Heart Awareness Month. And Tony, I know you've been a good colleague and friend over the years, and I know your passion is preventing preventable deaths, and you spearheaded Mayday Monday. I've had the honor of being on, I think it was in 2021, and I'm just thrilled for the opportunity to be back and talk about just some of the challenges that the fire service has with cardiovascular health during this month. So we want to shine a light on that. It's ironically sad as we're taping, and this month, we had DC fire. Just want to take a moment to send our condolences. Lost a member from a sudden cardiac event. Um, and of course, our thoughts and prayers are with the family, the department, the local, and the members. So let's talk about the kind of setting the scene of where we are with cardiac health and in particular in the fire service. So um, we all know that cardiac health continues to be an issue within the American population, general population. Heart disease is something that strikes many Americans over the course of their lifetime. Some, unfortunately, fatally with sudden cardiac death, and many with sudden cardiac events that have a lasting impact on quality of life. So that's kind of the broad picture. We also know that when we look at the fire service, we operate in very unique, strenuous, and high high intensity environments, right? And that challenges us in several different ways, um, pathophysiologically, within the body, right? So we're exposed to high extreme heat. That causes a prevalence in potential clotting factors that can contribute to a higher incidence of sudden cardiac events. We also, there's much research out there regarding dehydration in firefighters, and that's something that again contributes to uh, sudden changes in the blood thickness, blood viscosity, as it's called, which can again enhance clotting and sudden cardiac events. Um, and the research actually shows not only a high prevalence, but many, if not most, firefighters show up to shift already dehydrated, and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Very difficult to rehydrate the body while you're on shift in working out or running calls or doing the duties that we do. So it's important to be cognizant. Things like caffeine in excess are act as diuretics. They draw fluid out of our cellular level. Um, Things such as alcohol uh, also contribute to that same phenomenon and basically cause dehydration. And then just the normal course of going about our daily activities, working out, walking, all can lead to dehydration. So it's important to stay hydrated. Energy drinks oftentimes can contribute the caffeine in them and can put us in a negative state of hydration. So, I see more and more today, which is beautiful. Members on shift carrying around water bottles and hydration bottles. And so we need to be cognizant. That's one thing we can control. Um, the other items, of course, within the environment we operate in, is simply some of them aren't avoidable, right? So we've got a large amount of weight that we carry with our bunker gear and SCBA and tools. Some of the SCBA obviously that's as essential to protecting ourselves from carcinogens. The gear, obviously essential, but also retains heat. So we're going to talk a little bit about prevention and risk and what we can do, but it certainly underscores the importance of having very robust rehab protocols in place for scene rehab because of the impact of that heat, the impact of dehydration on scene. So the importance of being very diligent in our rehab is vitally important. So for those members that are listening, it's a good opportunity this month during Heart Awareness Month to take a look at what protocols you have for rehab and to uh, look at other opportunities to enhance those protocols. And again, protocols are written on paper, right? Are we practicing what we preach? Are we cycling people to rehab at appropriate time intervals? Are we cooling them down? Are we rehydrating them? Are we monitoring them? So all of those things we need to be thinking about. And just to drive that point home, I'm I guess 34 years fire rescue service pedigree as chief, and um, firefighters continue to have, the largest incident of firefighter death on scene continues to be sudden cardiac events. And with that, we know that for every sudden cardiac death, there's been estimated somewhere between 25 to 27 sudden cardiac events where the firefighter has a cardiac event that they survive. But unfortunately, oftentimes they don't end up back in the career and service that they love. So we've got to prevent these things before they happen. So I'm going to shift and talk a little bit about prevention and what we can do, what you can do for modifiable risk factors. And, I come at this through uh, two separate lenses. One is 34 years. Chief Leduc spent in the fire service in Broward County, Florida, a 900 person accredited metro department. Where I retired as assistant fire chief, and lost a number of members from sudden cardiac events. And looking back, were those preventable? And I guess that's a question that you can speculate on. I tend to think they would be, but we know there are modifiable factors that we can control. And the second lens I come at this from is for the past 7 years, I have been senior executive with LifeScan Wellness Centers, and I'm now the chief executive officer. So we're the largest nationwide provider of comprehensive first responder, firefighter, NFPA physicals. And so we see these preventable factors that are in firefighters across the country, that if we can control them and address them, we drastically reduce the risk. It's kind of like the analogy of having smoke detectors in the house or a sprinkler system in a commercial building. It's the same for us with our cardiac health. If we can control these couple items, it gives us great risk protection, and it's cardioprotective. So let's talk about what some of those are. So preventable risk, and there's, I guess we would say, non-preventable risk. So in the non-preventable risk, some of us just have genetics, right? And those genetics can predispose us to certain events and outcomes. So as an example, if you lost a parent or a sibling to sudden cardiac death at a very young age, um, your family has a long history of high blood pressure or high cholesterol, hyperlipidemia, familial cholesterol, it's called when it runs in the genetics. Um, you can't at this point, although at some point in the future we probably will, but you can't modify your genetics, right? What you're born with is what you're born with, that slate of cards. But what we can do is we can identify that. So for genetic risk, there is actually lab testing that we can do. We do it at LifeScan, and we can pre-identify those that are predisposed to having elevated risk of sudden cardiac events. And why is that important? It's like anything. What you know is what you can address. So if you know you have that elevated risk, we're going to be a lot more aggressive and work with you for you to be a lot more aggressive. Um, and what are some of those contributing factors? So we know that blood pressure is a driver of cardiac events. So particularly in the fire service, having poorly controlled blood pressure elevates significantly our risk for sudden cardiac events independently and sudden cardiac death. Um, and blood pressure can be managed right through weight control, through exercise, through nutrition, what we eat. But we also have a wide variety um, of pharmacological agents that we can use to control the blood pressure. So as we age, obviously, the arteries become a little bit more stiff and the blood pressure tends to increase. But in our profession as firefighters, it's essential that we identify elevated blood pressure and aggressively control it. Um, and so that's something, and we see at LifeScan, the close to 50,000 firefighters or so that we'll see this year. A significant number have elevations in their blood pressure that warrant, intervention. So it's important. It's called the silent killer for a reason, right? Because oftentimes it's asymptomatic until you have an event. But we also know that American cardiology, American heart guidelines have gotten much more aggressive with the thresholds for initiating treatment and the definitions of when are you elevated with hypertension. So that's one factor. We know that weight in and of itself is a factor with precipitating sudden cardiac events. So if you're carrying more weight on your frame than you should, particularly in the abdominal girth area, or what many refer to as the gut, that again is an independent precursor to elevated sudden cardiac risk. So, why is that important? Obviously, we've got to perform the 15 essential job functions that are outlined in NFPA as firefighters. And those require us to be physically fit, but also carrying extra weight puts us at elevated cardiac risk. And let's face it, maintaining a healthy weight, particularly when we're on shift and we're faced with lots of stress and cortisol, surges and is a challenge, right? So it's important. And again, we're doing this episode for Cardiac Awareness Month, so it's just a good time to pause and say, what physical fitness programs do you have in place at not only the department, but what routines are you doing off duty to keep yourself prepared? NFPA, addresses it with what's called METS recommendations, and that measures your cardiometabolic capacity, usually on a treadmill. So it's important to have some type of physical conditioning routine, both on duty and off, and to stay with it. The good friend of mine, Mark Bashore, Chief Bashore from Fire Rescue One, does a presentation around the country. Could you rescue you? And it's a great kind of reminder that our fitness and our co-members' fitness, those are the things that are going to save us and our crew if and when things go south on the fire ground. So very important for you to take a look at what you're doing. And again, the lens of early detection as part of the NFPA physical, and at LifeScan we use exercise physiologists to assess cardiometabolic levels and to provide non-punitive recommendations as to how to maintain that level of fitness, particularly as we age in the fire service. The research would tell us that we're prone to putting on weight every year of service. So, how do we adjust what we're eating, how we're working out, and the importance of that? For that, nutrition is a huge part of that. We have new nutritional guidelines now that are out with the Make America Healthy Again. And there's been some work in the fire service. Dr. Stephanos Kales up at Harvard, looking at firefighters that gravitated more to a Mediterranean type diet, so less carbs, less processed foods, more lean proteins, lots of vegetables. Actually had a healthier and safer risk profile than firefighters that did a more Western diet, high-end carbs and fats and whatnot. So if you want to learn more about that and get resources, there's a website that was put together by Dr. Keels, funded by the FEMA Assistance to Firefighter Grants, called Feeding America's Bravest. Again, that's Feeding America's Bravest, to help you with some ideas on how to keep that healthy component of weight. Other things that we should be thinking about, sleep plays a very important but sometimes underappreciated role in homeostasis and in cardiac risk. So if we have poor sleep health, whether that's through chronic obstructive apnea, weight-driven apnea, um, induced sleep disruption from excessive alcohol at night, any of the areas that can affect sleep have a direct impact as well. So, not the intent of this podcast to do a deep dive on sleep health, but there are, if you just go on artificial intelligence, AI, or the internet and Google, there are things that we can do for what's called sleep hygiene. How can we make our sleep more productive, a deeper REM, and healthier, right? So some of those real simple: controlling light, shutting down the electronics, all the social media, the TV, not drinking alcohol, before bedtime, not eating late meals, temperature control, and noise control. So obviously, some of that we can't control on shift, but we can control much of that, certainly off shift, some of it on shift. So sleep is an important portion. Um, Lipids. We know that lipids can be they contribute, right? That's basically particles within our blood system, produced within the liver, and those particles over time can solidify, calcify both soft plaque and hard plaque in your coronary vessels, whether that's, your left anterior descending, your right coronary artery, your circumflex coronary artery. Over time, a higher cholesterol causes a buildup of that plaque, that can, at most inopportune time, break loose a piece of that plaque and cause either a sudden cardiac death or a sudden cardiac event, blocking that vessel and not allowing the oxygenated blood to flow to that particular portion of the heart. So same thing, lipids are a byproduct of what we eat, how often we exercise, both aerobically and with strength training. Genetics, some of us, myself being one, have a predisposition to high um, cholesterol based on family genetics. The great, like blood pressure, the great news is we can lower that risk through healthier eating, more exercise, weight control, and some great pharmacological agents that are out there. Obviously, the statins have been around for decades and are very adept at lowering levels of bad cholesterol. PK9 inhibitors are now out. Those are injections that you can take that use a different mechanism, and also contribute to managing and lowering the cholesterol. So important. A lot of people may not even know what their cholesterol level is. So obviously, during your annual physical, It's important, cholesterol, not just total cholesterol, but breakdown. There's advanced cholesterol blood work that can be done to further analyze your particular risk and determine with your provider how best to address it. Um, we talked about exercise, so I'm not going to go into a deep dive, but glucose control is also an important factor in cardiometabolic health. So we have diabetes, we have prediabetes, or some call it metabolic syndrome, and that's when it's borderline, can be driven by genetics, weight, diet, lack of exercise. But we know that if you have elevated glucose, it's important to be monitoring that and have um, lifestyle changes to be able to address it. Obviously, again, there's a whole dearth of medications that can be used in addition, but starting with the basics, and that's lifestyle enhancements and lifestyle changes. So, lastly, I just want to touch on. So we've talked about the pathophysiology, we've talked about the environment we operate in as firefighters and how that puts us at a higher risk. Um, we've talked about modifiable risk factors. And the last piece I want to really touch on is the importance of enhanced early detection. So um, I'm going to have my hat on as CEO of LifeScan because that's what we do day in, day out with uh, thousands of first responders around the country. But it's important for your department and for you personally to undergo annual physical exams following the NFPA recommendations. I have the honor of sitting as a technical committee member of the NFPA 1580 committee now, which develops these consensus standards, and that's what they are. They're consensus minimum standards. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's not other best practices out there that we should be looking at above and beyond. But certainly they're a great starting point. Um, so if your department does not have a formal, mandatory, non-punitive annual exam that, as part of that exam, looks at all your modifiable risk factors, as well as an assessment of your current cardiac health and your current cardiometabolic health, whether that's through cardiac stress testing, whether that's through resting EKGs, whether that's through pulmonary function and fitness testing. It's important that you, at the department level, embrace that as a means to assure that you have a safe career, enjoy a healthy and long retirement, and don't become a statistic that we end up reading about in NIOSH report, tragically. I will point out there's a couple of recommendations that have come out of research that I've been honored to be part of. It was led by Dr. Denise Smith, who from out of Skidmore College in upstate New York, and more recently spent some time as Director of National Research at the U.S. Fire Administration under Dr. Lori Moore Merrill. So uh, the recommendations that came out is there's a tremendous opportunity to identify some red flags when it comes to cardiac risk through imaging. And we know that a large portion, I believe upwards of 80+% of sudden firefighter deaths from cardiac events have an enlarged left ventricle. It's called cardiac myopathy. It's usually can be caused by poor control of high blood pressure over time. So firefighters walking around, high blood pressure, you're unaware of it or choosing to ignore it, that causes the workhorse of the heart, the left ventricle, to pump a lot harder to get the blood where it needs to go throughout the circulatory system. And over time with that, we've found that there's a correlation between that and sudden cardiac events in firefighters. So the great part about that is it can be easily screened for with a cardiac echo. So basically an ultrasound of your heart, in particular the left ventricle, the septum. Um, it's something we've been doing and received accolades for at LifeScan for the last 30, nearly 30 years, 3 decades. So every physical includes a cardiac echo. In fact, an entire ultrasound of much of the body, organs, and systems. So it's something we can identify early, and then we can aggressively treat the underlying cause, i.e., high blood pressure, as an example, and actually, in many cases, reverse that hypertrophy or that enlargement, and that directly, significantly reduces your risk on the fire ground. And that's what this is all about, right? Surviving um, fireground risk, not just from injury and whatnot, but in this particular segment, cardiovascular risk. The second recommendation that came out of, and this is available through, you can Google it, or was published as the Better Heart Study with these recommendations. But the second piece of this was recommended for firefighters age 40, a one-time calcification scoring. So what that is a low dose CAT scan of the coronary arteries, and it actually quantifies the percent of uh, hardened plaque or calcified plaque in each artery. So I just had one done. Typically not recommended to be done, repetitively, frequently because of there is radiation associated with it, but it gives you a numeric scoring of each artery and how much calcified plaque is in those arteries. And again, that's something that gives you and your health provider a good amount of knowledge on what your risk is relative to others in your same age group and demographics, and then how aggressive that they should be with interventions. So again, that's recommended age 40 one time, and for clinical guidance. Some resources, right? So you certainly should be taking a look at the International Association of Fire Chiefs, in conjunction with many partners, the IFF, the National Volunteer Fire Council, and many others have put together a firefighters, excuse me, a healthcare providers guide for firefighter physicals. And it talks about much of this, and you can share that with your health provider. Obviously, if your department is contracting with an occupational health physical provider, they're typically, many of them are very familiar with the unique health risk, but your primary care physician may not be. So this guide is open access, FEMA funded, that tells clinicians, hey, I've got some different and unique elevated risks for cardiac events as a firefighter, and you may want to consider this additional testing, whether it be lab work or whether it be imaging. So the importance of what we know is knowledge is power, is the saying, allows us to implement, I call it human risk reduction, HRR, human risk reduction, meaning um, we do have elevated health risk, just like we do with cancer and as firefighters. But there's things we can do once we know that risk exists. And so that was the purpose of myself coming on the podcast, Tony. I appreciate the opportunity, and I commend you for shining a light on the work that we still need to continue to do, both as departments, the fire service globally, and individually to manage our risks, to reduce the tragic line of duties that we still unfortunately see. And in this month, spotlighting in particular cardiovascular risks. So thank you for the opportunity. It's my honor to serve you both as the IFC Health, Wellness, and Safety section treasurer, as well as many other roles. And everyone, stay safe out there. Have a healthy and prosperous 2026. And thanks for all your service, and keep everyone safe. Thank you.
Good stuff there from Brother Todd from LifeScan. He is a great supporter of Mayday Monday. This is the second time we've had him on to talk about heart health, and it's it's probably one of the most important issues we have to talk about in the fire service, right? And I don't know if you heard him, but one thing he did talk about was that as we were putting this together, as I was trying to get Todd on the show and we were trying to find a date and time to meet, Washington D.C., my former fire department, one that I spent such much time with, suffered the death of Battalion Fire Chief Keith Long. Um, at this point, right, we believe it is a cardiac related death. Keith was the second line of duty death in the year 2026, and the first one to die of cardiac related issues. This is nothing new to Washington, D.C., it's nothing new to the American Fire Service. In fact, we know that last year there was over almost 50% of the line of duty deaths last year were due to cardiac related issues. Over the last 11 years, 43% of the line of duty deaths have been cardiac related, stress, overexertion issues in the fire service. And again, those 11 years are nothing crazy. I mean, it's not something new. This is the way firefighters have been dying for probably decades in the fire service. This is a list. The list you see there on the picture are just some of the firefighters from 2025 who died in the line of duty. More and more. With that, one thing as we break these numbers down, there were 41 line of duty deaths caused by stress or overexertion in 2025. A lot of that, people will say, oh, it's an old volunteer issue. Well, no, because if you look at the numbers, again, 25 of those 41 were career, paid on call, or wildland firefighters. Probably all getting paid for this job, right? 16 of them were volunteers. The average age, 51 for career, paid on call, or wildland, 56 for volunteer firefighters. The youngest firefighter to die in the line of duty due to cardiac-related stress or exertion was 20 years old. He was a career firefighter in Hickory, North Carolina. And the oldest, there were two firefighters at age 70 died in the line of duty. One, a wildland firefighter with the National Park Service in Arizona, and one, a volunteer firefighter with Boiling Springs Fire Rescue in Virginia. While none of these, are easy, it's the same old story every year. Almost 50% of the line of duty deaths are due to cardiac, stress, overexertion. The frustrating part is that we are not fighting about that, right? Um, I'm going to next month, or I should say later this month in February. I'm going to the Virginia Fire and Rescue Conference to speak, talk about Mayday Monday stuff with everybody there, and it will talk about surviving the basement fires, surviving commercial building fires. We'll talk about surviving the fire ground overall, and also a lot of things that go on there. I see a lot of leadership classes. I mean, there's probably 10, maybe more leadership classes there. Um, One thing I don't see much of is how to take care of your heart. We will see lots of classes about engine company operations and truck company stuff. And again, very, very, very important. There's hands on classes about, again, engine, truck, command. There'll be, there will be rope classes, there'll be confined space classes, there'll be all these things, right? But there's not going to be a whole lot of classes down there talking about um, taking care of your heart, even though 43% of the firefighters over the last 11 years have died because of heart attacks, because of cardiac related issues. You know how many died because of interior firefighting? Our friends over at Data, Not Drama, researched the same amount of time, 2015 to 2025. And they found out of the 1,008 line of duty deaths that encompassed that whole time, 7% were due to interior firefighting. They died on the inside of the building. 43% of the people in that time died from cardiac related issues. So, what can we do? Let me share some of the stuff that we just listened to. We just learned from Todd some of the things that he talked about. This comes from this is kind of a nationally pushed kind of stuff here. What you'll see here again, this is American Heart Month. This is Heart Health Month for the entire country. And again, if you looked at the stats, I mean, the number one killer, leading cause of death in America is cardiac related, heart disease, heart disease, and the numbers in heart disease in the fire service reflect just like the national numbers, right? We're no healthier, we're no better off, we're not dying in less rates than the regular public. Some things that you can do: get active. You don't have to join a gym. You don't have to, pump iron, but you should get up off the recliner, get out there and do something. Eat well. We'll talk a little bit about that. I know Todd gave us a link to talk about eating well. Quit smoking. Um, that's a tough one. If I one thing I touched on in the Mayday Monday this month in the fire engineering is that we're not fighting. I see all the time we fight about GPMs. We fight about blue card versus SOG driven command. Right? We fight about fly in versus fly out. Are you kidding me? We fight about whether we lay out going in or we don't lay out. Booster backup. Right? Tank attack. One thing we don't fight about is our heart health. I say this because I recently saw um, it was on social media. It was an advertisement for a sticker company, and the sticker was a pack of cigarettes. Right, it looked like a Marlboro Man thing, and on it said "Blue Card Kills." Blue Card Kills on the cigarette pack. So again, I digress. But quit smoking. Quit smoking. That's a big one. Again, we could do that. Visit your primary care provider, right? Visit your primary care provider. Maybe even get some of those other tests that we'll talk about in a minute. So those are some proactive stuff that you can do. This is that website that Todd talked about. It was Harvard University, the T.H. Chan School of Public Health has this site that talks about feeding America's bravest. Please visit this. Get out and we'll put a link in the notes on the on the YouTube pages and stuff. But visit this website, Feeding America's Bravest. It talks, I think, about like a Mediterranean diet, but it's some good stuff that can help you to eat well and eat the way that will help you. Another thing that Todd talked about was the IAFC, the International Association of Fire Chiefs, produced this guide in conjunction with the Fire Department Safety Officers Association. I think the National Volunteer Fire Council, maybe even the IAFF, got to this. They have this resource which is called the Healthcare Provider's Guide to Firefighter Physicals. And again, we know that the stresses that are on our body, it's different than a regular physical. So here's a resource for you. There's the website for that. So these are some things that you can do to get out there and improve your health. Another thing, so this month's skill drill, I know it's crazy cold out there. We're stuck in this ice. We're frozen. At least a lot of the country is. The skill drill for this month is to take time while we're stuck inside and schedule a test. Schedule a stress test, right? Um, this was a picture from one of my last stress tests in DC, and very valuable information. Or Todd also talked about that calcium score test. I have some other friends who talked about their calcium score test and how it's providing them with some good information and resources to take to their doctors, which will help them to get a heart healthy, right? And that's so important. So again, this month take some time to talk about this. It seems to me like for so long, heart health has been the elephant in the firehouse. Um, no one sees it somehow. I don't know how they don't see it, but we don't want to recognize this. Again, aggressive. Whether we say aggressive, whether we say I don't know. We don't ever says we're passive firefighters, but all those things that we're fighting about. Let's make 2026 the year we fight to get those numbers down. Let's get that line of duty death numbers for heart, for stress, overexertion, all those things down. Um, we've done a really good job to get the other numbers down. Um, the again the interior firefighting numbers have been down for a long time for at least since 2015. But we continue to struggle with our heart health. So let's make 2026 the year that we don't struggle with this because we've been doing this too long, and it's time that we stop and we focus on our heart health. So again, thank you to Todd for coming on. It was so nice to have him come on and talk about what he does for the American Fire Service and what he can do for our friends here that come on the Mayday Mondays. So again, 2026, we're going to make it the year that we focus on heart health. Um, we tried to tackle that every February here, or a lot of Februarys, I should say, here on Mayday Monday. And this February is no different. So again, there's couple weeks left in 2020, in February of 2026. So take that time, focus on your heart health, and let's do that this year and see if we can change some of those other numbers. We've done a great job on some of the other things. Let's focus now on heart health. So with that, that's this month's edition of Mayday Monday. Thank you to Todd Leduc from LifeScan, and thank you to all those out there that watch this. But again, let's take this time, focus on your heart health so that we can survive the fire ground. Thank you so much, and